Hello, Danny. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. Yourself?
Yeah, good, thank you. And welcome back. Thank you for agreeing to come back. So it can't have been too painful the first time round.
That was great fun. I'm sure it'll be really good today, and I'm sure we'll deliver value for your people.
Well, that's the whole point of this, is hopefully to give people some, wisdom, some little bit of knowledge. I think people are looking more and more to become, self-educated, to get as much information that can directly help them, that they have a bit more control over things, because there's so much that we don't have any control over. And we know that, when you have that sense of uncertainty and lack of control, it can, again, increase stress levels. And the whole point of the breathing space is to give people that opportunity to just take a deep breath and, really look at what can they do, what can we all do individually, how can we start taking responsibility for our own health, and really protecting ourselves. So so that's what I'd love to talk to you about today, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
Absolutely. So what would be your, I know we touched on it last time, but what would be your main recommendations to people? You were just telling me before we started recording that you have a very interesting poster in your clinic, and I think that's brilliant, a brilliant way of getting people to maybe take a bit more notice.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a guy who speaks on a lot of chiropractic stages called Bill Esteb, and he gave a load of us access to this poster for free, and it's titled, it's very enticing and kind of intriguing and thought-provoking, and that's the point. It's how to catch the coronavirus. So it's just to stop people in their tracks, and it's really simple stuff, and it's things like, we were talking earlier, common sense is not that common, is it? And this whole epidemic and pandemic has highlighted that. So it's really simple things like, if you want to catch it, stop exercising. If you want to catch it, we're talking about coronavirus right now, but any virus, any bacteria, getting sick, anything, because we all have viruses within us the whole time.
Well, we are made of viruses. That's a big part of how our whole bioderm works, actually how our own internal ecosystem actually works. Without viruses, we wouldn't exist. Without bacteria, we wouldn't exist.
Spot on, absolutely. We are an ecosystem, and there's billions and trillions of viruses and bacteria and parasites and all sorts of stuff living in us, and we depend on them, they depend on us. So don't get adequate rest if you want to get any virus, if you want to get sick. Don't bother hydrating. Make sure you're rarely dehydrated if you want to get any virus. Eat a poor diet. See, these things are common sense, but they're not common practice, are they? Because a lot of people don't do any of what I've just said already, the first few points. The 6 or 7 points, really. Think negative thoughts if you want to get ill. That's, to me, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of people out there still don't equate negativity with getting ill. More and more people in the Western world now, because the Eastern world have known this forever, but more and more people in the Western world are understand the correlation between your thoughts and your health, and your thoughts and how you feel, so think negative thoughts if you want to get ill, and that ties into stuff like,
well, I think, there's a huge amount of research on the nocebo effect. The opposite of the placebo effect. So that whole idea of that really constantly demonstrates the power of thought, and the power of thought over our emotional state and over our physical state as a result of that. That there are so many cases where people were accidentally told the wrong news about their health. They were given the wrong test results, and actually ended up dying because they were told they had something, and then they totally believed it, and it was only afterwards they realized actually those were the wrong test results. That actually belonged to somebody else. And just as you have the stories that people have been told, I read a book many years ago, and I'm sure you're pretty familiar with it, which is the Deepak Chopra Quantum Healing book. 1986 I think it was published, so it's pretty, can't believe it's that old, but yes, it's pretty old. And he tells the story of a woman who went into surgery, and they were going to remove a tumor, but when they opened her up, she was riddled. there was no way they could remove it. It wasn't going to make any difference. And they had a policy in that hospital to never discuss anything negative while the patient was under anesthetic, that they were not allowed to say anything around the patient. And the family members of this woman, because this woman was quite elderly, had said to him, whatever you find, when they spoke afterwards, they said, look, there's nothing we can do. And they said, just tell her that you've got it all and she's fine. Just tell her that. And of course people go, that's not ethical. That's not ethical to lie. And they said, that is our wish, that look, if you can't do anything for her, there's nothing you can do. We'll just manage the pain, and we'll as long as she lives a happy, whatever's left of her life. And, a few weeks later, she was completely recovered.
Power of the mind, eh? It's, whatever you put in there is what's going to happen.
Feeding your mind, feeding your body.
Totally. As DeMartini said many, many years ago, what you think about and think about, you bring about.
Ooh, I like that.
So we were speaking before, weren't we? Whatever you focus on expands. That's the way the universe works. It's not just the way our minds work, it's the way the universe works, isn't it?
Absolutely. So what are some practical, so those are the things to do if you want to get sick.
Okay, there was a few more actually, and then the reality is, if you want to get well, you do the opposite to these things. So make sure you never wash your hands ever if you want to get sick. Get outside, get some sunshine, get some vitamin D, get in the fresh air, but obviously if you don't want to get well, make sure you never wash your hands and never get sunshine and never get any fresh air. So the reality is, as I always talk about in my total health transformation programs, if you want to get well and stay well, you've got to eat, move and think on purpose. That purpose is to do whatever you need to move in the direction of being as healthy as you can be. So for example, like, make sure you drink loads of water, because every cell, not every cell, but most cells in the body are supposed to be bathed in water. Apart from the stomach, pretty much every other one is supposed to be bathed in water. And when we're stressed, the immune system gets down-regulated.
Yeah.
And that is all relating to and because of the stress response. I'm sure your listeners are well familiar with the stress response. Just in case they're not, though, for those that aren't, it goes back, 20, 30, 40,000 years to when we were hunter-gatherers. Since humanity began, the reality is the stress response still works the same today as it did with our ancestors. Yeah. Meaning, like, if they were, for example, the stress response is the fight or flight. So if they're out hunting to bring back the food for the family, if there's a saber-toothed tiger there, now the sensible thing to do would be to run, because one man is highly unlikely going to be able to defeat a saber-toothed tiger. I'm sure some of them did, but most of them not. So they've got two decisions. They either fight that beast or they run. Okay. So,
or play dead.
Or play dead, but they might get eaten at the same time then, though. So assuming they want to stay alive, probably run away or fight it. So probably the sensible option is going to be to run if they can outrun it, So when the stress response kicks in, that's an intelligent response. The body wants to keep you alive, okay? So one of the things it does, well, it does loads of things, about 20, 30, 40 things even that it does. It's going to start to increase the heart rate, because you want lots of increased blood around the body to give you that power to either fight or run. So it down-regulates your immune system. And that's intelligent in that instance. Do you know why? Because if you want to stay alive, if there's potential imminent death, right, the immune system's not that important at that point if you are wanting to outrun that beast. So the immune system gets down-regulated.
Wouldn't the digestive system also be included in that down-regulation as well? So you don't need to be digesting your last meal to be running away. You've got to just
exactly.
You want to offload some of it, but you don't want to be digesting it.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that happens. So all the blood will go away from the digestive system and to the arms and the legs to be able to run.
And the thinking, logical brain as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. That old phrase, when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. It's absolutely spot on, and that's part of the stress response. You know, so when the stress response kicks in, memory is, it goes down.
That's irrelevant.
Exactly. Yeah. Concentration goes down, focus goes down. That's why, that's when emotion goes up, intelligence goes down. Is so relevant, because we've all been in stressful situations where we've forgotten what we did 10 seconds ago. We can't find the keys to the car and whatnot, just because we're not able to focus properly because the stress response is kicked in.
Yeah.
The bloodstream's getting flooded with cortisol, adrenaline, serotonin production gets down regulated as well, so you don't feel good. Serotonin, one of the feel good hormones, and dopamine, they all get down regulated.
And is it true that I remember hearing that serotonin, about 80% of it is actually produced in the gut?
A large percentage of it is, yeah.
So again, that whole thing, if you're restricting the blood flow to your digestive system, not only are you reducing your immune system, because that's our first line of defense, you're not absorbing the vitamins, minerals, etc. that you need from your food because it's not working properly, but also, they see a big correlation between, depression and things like IBS and other sort of digestive tract issues. Did I kind of read that right? Was that something that?
Yeah, very much so. Everything is intimately connected. And there's the old adage, or the old phrase, the gut is the second brain. So, and a huge percentage of the immune system is in the gut, about 70 or 80% of it. And part of it is through the nervous system as well. And obviously the nervous system controls everything in the body. So everything is really intimately connected. You're definitely on the right track there.
So it all kind of, makes, so when you hear these stats and you hear this kind of, understanding of how the body is, it's a whole ecosystem in and of itself. To me, one of the things I think is quite worrying is this language that is being used, which is, we will only be safe when there is a vaccine, effective vaccine developed, and things like that. And that language, you've done NLP training. I'm an NLP trainer, and it, language is so powerful, and it can be used positively and negatively, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously. But that implies that we don't have responsibility, and we don't have any way of keeping ourselves safe until then. And of course, then if that never gets developed, or it's not effective, we're never safe. And of course, that's not true.
Yeah, so very, very true. It does sadly seem like this whole the media driven and the government message and propaganda, really, it's all seemed to be driving in the direction of compulsory vaccinations for this COVID-19. The reality is, coronavirus is, yes, this is a different strain. The coronavirus has been around for a long, long time. We've all had coronaviruses in our nose, for many, many years. And, this is a different strain, so they keep telling us. The reality is, unfortunately, it does seem like they're driving this train in a direction very, very fast to compulsory vaccinations. And because this whole fear has been, it seems to have calmed down a little bit, but people are still fearful and worried, and some are still hysterical. I would bet my life savings on the fact that a lot of people around the world will be begging for this vaccination. And then, do you know what they'll say? Okay, you want it, you can have it. Throughout time, if people, any kind of historical figures, famous or infamous, they understood that if they want to control people, they make them scared. Because when people are in fear, they reach out, they want someone to lead them, don't they? And you were talking before about herd immunity and stuff like that. People are, like that phrase I heard years ago, sheeple. people follow the herd, don't they? You know, whether they're right or wrong, you know. So it's,
yeah, and it's, you know, and it's dangerous almost to kind of go against, you know, whatever the popular opinion is and whatever's kind of, you know, out there. And I think, you know, what kind of made me quite cross over the last little while is that if I put anything on my Facebook wall, my personal one, about something that maybe challenges, you know, what's been said in the mainstream media, and not because I believe I'm right, I'm simply asking some questions, is how quickly I'm jumped on, you know, and told, no, you're wrong. And I was like, well, that's your opinion. And everyone is talking from their model of the world, from their little bit of information that they know. And I just want to gather as much information to be as well informed as I possibly can be, for myself, for my family, for my children, you know, for whoever is directly around me, and whoever, and hopefully if people are watching this and haven't turned off now because we've started talking about something like this, because the reality is exactly that. It's about minimizing fear, and it's not about being crazy and irresponsible. That's not what's being advocated. But it's almost like this polarization happens, isn't it? You're either with us or against us. It's that black and white view of the world, and there is no black and white. I absolutely agree that if someone is elderly, if they have underlying health issues, they need to take extra special care and precautions in terms of their own health and protect themselves, and the people around them need to do the best they can as well. But quarantining well people, you know, really, we're not really going to know the long-term outcome of this, because it's not going to really come out until many, many years, you know. And for children who are being exposed to this constant negative news, and, you know, fear factor for maybe their parents or grandparents or whoever around them, you know, the reality is we don't know the impact that's going to have on them. And I read something recently that said COVID-19 is now going to be an extra factor in terms of the ACE score, the Adverse Childhood Experience score. That's very scary, because we know from huge data that where they did the ACE score versus health in adulthood, that there is a direct correlation between cortisol being released and not being managed when you're younger, and having these really horrific experiences that causes a lot of trauma, and adult health later in, you know, in life. So we are responsible as a society for making sure that the young people today don't carry this stress and this trauma with them throughout the rest of their lives too.
I agree. Yeah, very, very true. We really don't know what the long-term effects of this, the lockdown or quarantine is going to be, for sure. It's not going to be a good outcome. I know I can say that with certainty.
Yeah, I mean, well, we have a choice, isn't it? For some people, it might make them stronger. You know, for some people, it might, you know, for me personally, as I said, I don't know if I said it on recording or before, but I've become a lot more self-reliant, I suppose, in terms of not looking for the outside world to tell me what should I think and is my opinion okay, because of that being jumped on. And I had this kind of, for a few weeks, I was living in fear of posting anything. Almost I'd write something, go, oh, will I press send? Will I actually post it and have it out there? And as time's gone on, I've just gone, yeah, what's the worst that can happen? Someone disagrees with me. Okay, they disagree with me. It's not going to kill me.
Exactly, that old thing, adage, what doesn't kill me makes me stronger.
And that is our choice, really. So if you were to give your 3 top tips for boosting your immune system, what would be your sort of top things that you would, or maybe you personally do yourself and that you recommend to your patients?
Well, one of the things which we've touched on a little bit, I call it a media diet. Basically based on, because you've just said, like making posts on Facebook, and almost immediately, within seconds sometimes, people really jump down on you. Because I've experienced that myself. You've noticed some things on my wall I've posted on Facebook, and within seconds somebody's saying you're wrong, kind of thing. And you know, never before in history have I seen people be polarized so much and respond with anger and vitriol to somebody that they, you know,
Don't even know.
Yeah, either don't even know or do know. You know, it's been crazy. So one of the things I would recommend, and this applies to mainstream media as well as social media, give yourself a break from that.
Yeah.
Because, you know, rightly or wrongly, when we look on social media, you know, whether it be in the past, pre all this pandemic stuff, you might notice something that somebody's posted on Facebook and it looks like their life is amazing. So it's quite easy for envy to come in if you see somebody on an amazing holiday with a beautiful partner, etc., etc. Or the opposite end of the spectrum, you may see somebody, there's loads of people on Facebook who live their lives through Facebook and they post everything and they have a rant and they just download all their negative shit on people. We've all seen those people on Facebook, haven't we? Some people do it consistently. What happens when you read that? Doesn't make you happy, does it? It doesn't produce serotonin and dopamine. It spikes the adrenaline. It spikes the cortisol. It increases the stress response in you. The exact same thing happens when we watch the news. The news have known for centuries now, really. That phrase I heard a few years ago, if it bleeds, it leads. So they never, as a rule, post and film stuff that is happy and positive. It's always fear. It's always worry. It's like the end of the world is around the corner. So as soon as you watch that or listen to it on the radio or whatever, stress response, like all those different things we were talking about before, the immune system gets down-regulated. So give yourself a media diet. I'm not saying never use Facebook again, but maybe just pick a couple of sections, not at the beginning of the day and not at the end of the day, okay? Maybe 5-10 minutes at one or two different points throughout the day. I don't watch the news at all. I haven't for probably over a decade now. I don't read newspapers. I want positive, empowering, growth, inspiring thoughts in my mind, not the stuff that you read in the paper typically.
I saw a really good little quote the other day, and it said, whilst the pessimists and optimists were arguing, the opportunists came in.
Nice, I like that. So yeah, that's the big thing for the today's show from my perspective. That is the big thing really, because we want to look to mitigate and regulate that stress response. Stress response is not designed to be a chronic thing that runs the whole time. It's meant to be sporadic. You know, like we talked about.
We are not designed to sustain long-term stress response. We are physically not designed for that. And as you said, you know, the reality is our bodies actually don't know what century we're living in.
Exactly.
Our body is responding the way it has been designed to. Our brains have gone off on a completely different tangent from our bodies and living that very disconnected, you know, heads on sticks. I heard a great expression, you know, your head on a stick. It's like the rest of your body doesn't exist. You're just inside your head. And looking at that whole connection between the mind and the body, you know, it's not something people are generally taught. It's not something that is actually encouraged, you know, actively in terms of taking the time to kind of stop, to breathe, to become present, to really kind of check in with yourself. You know, how am I physically? How am I mentally? How am I psychologically? You know, what is actually going on? We just kind of, we've been taught to essentially suppress those natural responses and those natural messages. And I remember hearing that out of the 100% of the information traveling in your body, 80% comes up and only 20% comes down from the head. So that 80% of wisdom, that, as you said, that gut brain or the heart brain, you know, we have a lot of wisdom in our heart, we have a lot of wisdom in our gut. And it's like the head is revered, the head kind of analytical, you know, who's right, who's wrong. That's, you know, when that's given control over everything, you know, we're really in trouble because we're not paying attention until things get too bad. And it's like, I always think of whatever's going on inside of you and whatever's going on in your life, it's like a hologram, isn't it? It's a representation of everything else that's going on around us. It's that, you know, micro and macro view of the world. If you look at what's happening inside a cell and what's happening then inside a body and what's happening inside a community and what's happening inside the world, it's often reflected. But we only have control over ourselves.
Absolutely. And that touches on something you mentioned earlier on. People really need to take responsibility for their own lives and their own health. Because people, like we talked about sheeple before, You know, do your own research. You know, don't just take as gospel the stuff that you read on the newspapers or that somebody says on social media or something like that. Do your own research and be responsible for your own thoughts and your own reactions to things.
Yeah.
Yeah, responsibility is a big thing. I've talked about that for nearly 15 years as a chiropractor now. You know, taking responsibility for our own health is something that people really need to do now more than ever.
Absolutely. I think this is an opportunity really to, you know, to get that out there. And I just always think it's interesting how, you know, complementary and alternative therapies and approaches, you know, it's alternative to what is always the question. It's like, the reality is that everything is valid. I've never said, you know, mainstream medicine is completely and utterly wrong. I think that's insane. Anyway, I take a Panadol if I've got a headache. That's what I do. But at the same time, if I've always got a headache and I'm always taking Panadol, I'm not looking at actually where is it coming from and what's causing it, and maybe go back and addressing, you know, the root cause of something. And I think there's a lot of, you know, fear in terms of, well, if you're not following the mainstream, you know, you're risking yourself, you're risking your life, you're risking somebody else's life. And the reality is, yeah, take some information, but don't take it as being, as you said, kind of gospel.
Yeah, exactly. Educate yourself is a takeaway, another takeaway from today, really. Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So digital media diet, cut out as much of that as possible. What would be your second top tip?
So hydrate yourself. Now, these are all simple things to do, all free things to do, really. Hydrate yourself. You know, you've seen probably 3 or 4 times during this talk, I've been having drinks of water because...
And of course, I forgot to bring my glass of water today. And as soon as you say it, I'm like, I'm actually really thirsty. I need to get a drink.
Yeah, so the body needs water. The brain needs water. It doesn't produce its own water. So, you know, drinking water does all sorts of great things. It's gonna obviously hydrate your system. It's gonna be good for your skin. It's great for concentration and focus and memory. You know, and be careful of the source of the water as well. Tap water in most countries isn't great, to put it mildly. I use a water ionizer and alkalizer to make the water alkaline and take all the 99.9% of the impurities out of it.
Okay.
So do some research on that is a good thing. It's an investment. They're not cheap to get a good one, but it's a lifetime investment. So that would be my second one. All of these are really simple, you know, but it goes back to what we said.
In the meantime, if you've already got tap water, that's fine. Just drink the tap water for now, and then, you know, look at maybe
yeah, I mean,
have a water filter. I mean, what would you think of, you know, the normal, just the filters you get where you fill up and it filters down? Would that just for now be?
That's much better than tap water for sure. So you can get those like Brita filter jugs for about 15 quid. So start with that. That's an improvement on tap water, absolutely. And then, you know, once you get a thirst for it, you might want to invest in something.
Nice pun.
Yeah, indeed. I couldn't resist it. Bad, so, yeah, had to.
Media diet. Hydrate yourself. I always think it's quite interesting about water, though, because everybody knows that you should be drinking about 8 glasses of water a day.
Minimum.
And the reality is, actually, many people don't do that. They know it. It's that thing, and we know what we should do, but we don't do it. And I think, again, coming back to language, is to stop using shoulds, to stop using the word should.
Absolutely.
I have a real thing. If anyone, and I don't care how much I love them, says to me, do you know what you should do? In my head, immediately, I go, do you know what you should do? Because the word should, it's really interesting. I did a training a few years ago called motivational interviewing, and it was about addiction, dealing with addictions. And it's interesting because whilst I got something out of it, I still went back to NLP to help anyone with any kind of addictive behavior, because it was way more powerful. But one thing that came out of the book was that if you back anyone, whether they have an addiction or not, into a corner, they will come out fighting. So if you put yourself into a corner by saying words like I should and I must and I have to, And that actually, the minute so if I was saying to you, Danny, do you know what you must do? Do you know what you need to do? Do you know what you should do? The reality is, I can see already your body starts tensing up.
It does. Yeah.
I haven't even said what you should do or need to do or have to do. But that language, and when people become aware of that language, they start to notice actually that tension that happens in the body, because we start to go into judgment. We start to go into, I failed, I'm not performing the way I should, I'm not doing what I have to be doing. And we start comparing and everything else, and we start thinking that there's only one way of doing something. And the problem with that is that as human beings, we don't like being put into a corner. We don't like feeling like we're backed into just doing something one way. So even if we know logically it's the most useful thing to do, it's the right thing to do, we'll actually not do it, because it's just an instinct reaction to kind of fight against and to have that pushback. So I love the little change, which instead of should, we say could.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very, very small change, but for so many people can have a really, so I could drink 8 glasses of water. Nothing to stop me.
Indeed. Yeah, you absolutely could, for sure. Yeah, we all could. You know, it's very, very great point you make about the use of language. And you mentioned that, you know, people know these things, but I remember hearing a phrase years ago, to know and not do is to not know. So I say to my clients all the time, you know, because they might say, oh, I know that, I've heard that. I'm like, okay, great. Are you doing it? No, I'm not doing it. Well, you don't know it.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Well, you and I have been on courses where they really, really talk about that. The 3 most dangerous words are, I know that. And I spoke about this the other day in another chat with somebody. And, you know, exactly that. You might, so whenever I hear that, I say to people, okay, what would be great is to rephrase that into, instead of I know that, as, oh, I've heard that before.
Yeah.
If you say, yeah, I've heard that before, and sometimes it takes 10, 20, even 100 times to hear something before the penny really drops. We have to kind of be in the right place, don't we, to kind of really receive that information. And again, but that's our responsibility. We can put ourselves into a better frame of mind to go, okay, I'm open to hearing something, even if I've heard it before, to hearing it again, and this time going, okay, so I hear it, now what do I do?
Yeah, that's a much more empowering viewpoint to take on it. Absolutely. The other, that's something that reminds me of is we often hear people say, oh, I'll try and do that. Like, no. Like Yoda said in Star Wars, I'm not a big fan of Star Wars, apart from a few of the great quotes. Do or do not. There is no try.
Absolutely.
You know? Because try is like, have you ever heard somebody say, I'll try and do that? And
yeah, immediately. I know they're not going to do it.
And then they actually do it? Never in my life have I ever heard somebody say that. And then
I would say it's our little get out of jail free card.
Yeah, it is.
I tried, and my kids always go on at me going, stop, because I'll say, don't try, just do it. Either do it or don't do it. Don't try, because that's, and people go, but surely the expression "try your best" is a positive expression. And again, it's that understanding that language is so powerful in terms of what does it really mean? How is it really being translated by whoever's receiving it? Just do it or don't do it. It's up to you. But don't. I love that whole thing of you can either be living at effect or at cause. And if you're at effect, you're living at effect with 3 things. Are you blaming? Are you complaining? Or are you justifying?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
And if you find yourself doing those, then you're not taking responsibility. You're and it's easy to, isn't it, to push it onto somebody else and to push it outside of yourself. It's just not very empowering.
Absolutely. It's totally disempowering, isn't it? Talking about the trying, I had another great phrase not so long ago. Trying is failure with honor. I thought that was brilliant. So yeah, it all comes back to responsibility, which is a big takeaway from today, really, for your listeners, I think.
Yep. So your third and final tip for maintaining our health, what's the next big thing that would really be useful?
It's very simple. Just get back to cooking your food from scratch, preparing your food from scratch. get back to basics. Start, if you're not eating much in the way of fruit and veg at the moment, get back to basics. Start putting some better quality food, which is your fuel, isn't it, for your body and your mind and your spirit, really. Get back to basics and start cooking your food from scratch rather than...
Oh my God, and there's so many free cooking videos and demonstrations and you know, I think now, in fairness, I do most of my own cooking. The occasional takeaway has to be done because I can't. I'm exhausted in cooking for kids. But I think if you're doing it 80-90% of the time, it's better than probably where most people were at before, which is the ready meals or the a takeaway 3 or 4 times a week. You know, and if people, obviously people are out and they're working, they've got to pick something up. You know, again to see if it can be fresh. You know, can it be made in front of you? Can you see it? You know, being put together.
Exactly. Yeah. So just getting back to the basics will be an improvement for most people, I reckon.
Yeah, absolutely. So wonderful. So diet in terms of the mind. You know, what are we feeding our brain in terms of information coming in? Keep yourself hydrated and watch what you're putting into your body to help your gut. And yeah, those things. And they will all have this massive knock-on effect to everything else, don't they, in terms of your quality of your sleep, you know, the quality of your energy during the day, the quality then of you know, how your immune system is responding, and to really, really boost that. And it's quite interesting because there is a lot going on in terms of, you know, people recommending vitamin D and vitamin C. And, you know, I started taking magnesium recently, and that's really helped in terms of my sleep quality. And it's something that when I started looking into the research, it's huge. It's this massive, you know, but that will very rarely be the first port of call when you go to a doctor and you say, I can't sleep. They'll give you a sleeping tablet, which doesn't give you good quality sleep, which sometimes makes you feel very groggy. And then you're relying on caffeine and sugar throughout the day to wake you up. And then you're in that horrible vicious cycle. So there is so much we can do ourselves to really help ourselves. And that's got to have, you know, if we can catch something negative, how about catching something positive? That would be great.
Yeah. It's a great viewpoint for sure. Yeah, magnesium is super powerful. It does so many.
I can't believe the power of it. I started researching it just this week. I mean, I was taking it, but then I really, because actually I had a fantastic rheumatologist a few weeks ago who recommended it. She's very much a holistic view of a body, and it was quite refreshing actually to go and see somebody who was just go, right, I'm very, very sensitive to medication. So if I took an antihistamine, it's like I've been shot with an elephant tranquilizer. And if I take the non-drowsy ones, it's like I've had 10 cups of coffee. So I have a very low tolerance really in terms of medication. I'm extremely sensitive. And she took that on board. She actually looked at some of the things I had been prescribed in the past. And she was really shocked. She said, you know, these are for someone who's seriously ill. You know, you were prescribed something so strong, really unnecessarily. And that really kind of was a bit of a wake-up call for me as well, to go, hang on a minute. Just because someone in a white coat and a stethoscope around their neck has recommended something or prescribed something, do your research, check out. Well, I was actually given something that wasn't even FDA approved by a doctor, you know, and I had some pretty horrible side effects from it actually. And it was like, okay, let's just do a bit of digging. Sometimes it doesn't take much. Sometimes you have to really dig to find the truth, but you know, a little bit of digging is better than nothing at all. So yeah, it was quite interesting to look at the power of magnesium. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. Again, not only does it boost your immune system, you know, which again has this knock-on effect, it's just got incredible properties.
It does, yeah. One of them being it relaxes tissues. It's one of the reasons why you found it so much easier to sleep. You know, it's one of its many functions is to relax tissues, meaning if you haven't got enough magnesium in muscles, for example, the muscles are most likely going to be tight, in spasm, maybe even painful. In terms of blood vessels, if there's not enough magnesium there, that's going to constrict your blood vessels. If your arteries are constricting, your blood pressure is going to go up, isn't it? So these loads of functions that magnesium do, it's a similar sort of thing with a load of other vitamins, minerals and nutrients. It's like, it goes back to what we said at the very beginning. It's a whole ecosystem and everything interacts with each other. So it's fascinating. I've always found it really, really interesting.
Well, Luckily, Danny, I don't think we're heads on sticks. I think we've got we've got more going on below the neck. So,
Absolutely, for sure.
Danny, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for yet again sharing some absolute little golden nuggets for people to take away, because it's got to be simple. It's got to be simple and easy. Otherwise, it's just, it's just a case of I'll try and fail successfully.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you for having me on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure. Happy to help your listeners.
Awesome, and we'll put the link again, because I know your book. There's a link to your book. People can read it. They can download it today and learn a lot more about how they can live on purpose, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. So they can, if they want to reach out to me, they can either drop me an email at danny@dannyscahill.com. You can also obviously have a look at my dannyscahill.com website. You can get the book through there, and there's loads of other useful information for you there as well. You can also reach out to me on Facebook as well if you want to
Fantastic. And if they're lucky enough to live near you, they can even, your clinic is back open. And,
the chiropractic practice is back open, Crawley Chiropractic Centre in West Sussex.
Yeah, fantastic. Danny, have an awesome rest of the day, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon before this is all over.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one. Speak to you soon.
Fantastic. Bye.
Cheers.